Well, I'd like to welcome everyone back to the show. Karen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I can we kick off the conversation by you just briefly introducing who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm a writer based in Toronto, and I have a fascination with anything to do with the science of trying to understand, you know, why we think, feel, and do the things we do. So that brings me to dreaming, and I'm fascinated by dreaming. When I was young, I think I was 8 or 9, and my dad opened the first independent sleep lab in Canada. So I was very much a guinea pig for him, and
Mhm.
I would sleep, and he would practice putting electrodes on me when he was setting up his lab. So that's sort of how it started for me, my interest and fascination in sleep and dreams.
Sleeping dreams, we all do it. Hopefully, we get enough sleep and we have pretty decent dreams. But it is a fascinating area. Since the birth of psychology, I think people have been trying to understand the science and the philosophy, I guess, to some extent, behind dreams. I was wondering, could you speak a little about what brought you into that area? Obviously, it was your dad's lab. You were a guinea pig in that lab. But what, as we know, you are in the midst of writing a book right now, assembling through interviews and the science and such. What, what is the reason you've gone into dreams? What really sort of lit your fire as a professional to kind of dive and spend a lot of time doing the research and in the midst of writing a book?
I'm fascinated by dreams for many reasons, I'm sure as everyone is. And I'm fascinated about the fact that it's this common experience that we all have, yet it's so personal. So there's so many mysteries, there's some
Mhm.
certainties, but there's so many mysteries that still exist. And I love just delving into a topic and really investigating and trying to understand why things work the way that they do. And so I love looking at dreaming in terms of a physiological phenomenon, but as well as a very personal experience. And so for me,
Mhm.
I'm fascinated by what are the possible functions of dreams? Why is it that we dream, is on the one hand, and also how can we use our dreams? So I'm
Mhm.
really interested in looking at differentiating between the possible functions, but also the uses. And we can all choose how we use our dreams and how we view our dreams. And, some people may choose not to look at them at all, and some people may choose to reflect on them. So I'm just really interested in that personal aspect as well as the common experience that we all share.
Well, perhaps we can start the conversation sort of general, and then we can get more specific in how it influences, our mental, emotional, and physical resilience and well-being and such. But you you are the most you are the most well-educated person I know in this area of dreams. And so I'd just like to maybe kick off the conversation by understanding what is the recent science about why we dream? I mean, obviously there may be two or three, maybe multiple aspects, but what perhaps you could just clarify for our listeners and myself right now.
Sure. There's possible ideas of functions of dreaming.
Mhm.
So I think, and we can get back to this maybe later, but it's really interesting to look at what is a dream. And that I'm still really trying to delve into. And you'd think, there's still so much debate over even what a dream is. So we could maybe talk about that too, if you'd like to,
Yes.
because that fascinates me so much, how people look at dreams and view dreams differently. So possible functions of dreams, it could be for memory consolidation, memory
Mhm.
processing, learning. Those are two very big things. And this is across the the sleep cycle. So this is different things are happening at different times during sleep and during dream sleep. So there's memory consolidation and memory processing, and learning. There is a thought that it helps us process emotions. So coming to terms with our emotions, maybe processing them in a different way than we do in our waking lives.
Mhm.
And another potential function is that it prepares us for life's problems, life's dangers. It's looked at as a threat simulation. So we can
Mhm.
simulate different scenarios to prepare ourselves better in waking life. So those are some of the few things. And then we could also look at, say, the uses, or it could be functions potentially. It depends on, it's different perspectives. Uses could be for healing, or there's
Mm.
long-standing traditions of how they can be used in therapy or creative uses. So that's kind of getting into the use area versus the
Mm.
function, which is really fascinating for me.
I want to dive into each of these. I think they're fascinating. But just to add my 2 cents to that, David Eagleman's one of the neuroscientists I like to follow because he's able to take complex things like a science journalist and, describe the functions of the brain in a very layman's perspective. And one of the things I pulled from one of his books, I can't remember which one exactly, it may be his latest. He talked about dreaming because the visual cortex, the brain, you probably know this quite well, Karen. The brain is made up of different networks, and these networks don't just form one organ. They're constant competition for each other. It's almost like the wilds of the safari in a sense. And one of the things he said is that the reason we dream, or one of many functions that we dream, is that because other parts of the brain might encroach on it, it fires off, by dreaming, it fires off the visual neurons in that visual cortex, and that staves off the gobbling up of other parts of the brain trying to take up the visual cortex. Because he said if we didn't dream in this particular very sort of nuts and bolts kind of way, then more than likely over time the other cortex or other parts of the brain would eat up and take over those visual processing because it goes dormant for whatever 7 to 8 hours. I was wondering, have you
That's
heard anything
fascinating.
about that?
I'm really interested in the whole idea that the prefrontal areas of the
Mm,
brain they quiet down at certain times when we're dreaming. So you have that the limbic system and that emotional system is active and it's aroused, but then you have the quieting down of that area of your brain that deals with rational judgment, decision making, those kind of things. And it's interesting to think of it in terms of, say, for example, REM dreams, when those are the dreams. Dreams in REM sleep is when you have the most vivid, bizarre,
mm.
wild dreams. And that happens throughout the night in the sleep cycle goes 4 or 5 times a night. So when you're in REM, it's that's when you're having your more vivid dreams. And it's interesting to think about what's happening in the brain and the activity that's happening when you look at it in terms of what's happening in your dreams. So I find that really interesting. And how is
Yeah,
it
I'm
that
sorry.
but we have oh no, I was just thinking, but then we have this there's this idea that we have the ability for rational thought to say, okay, I'm going to try and fly, or I'm going to try and, I'm steering a ship and then I go underwater and I can somehow breathe. You've got this rational thought to create this scenario, but you also are being convinced that this is possible. So there's the difference between the bizarre elements and the rational thought that lets you dream up these bizarre elements, from what I understand. It's really
So
interesting.
yeah, so rational thought for me would mean some level of consciousness or awareness that we are actually thinking. Or have I misinterpreted what you're saying, that we can have rational thoughts in a sleep state?
So what it's really interesting, this gets sort of into what is dreaming. And from what I've learned and was speaking with different researchers and scientists
Mm,
and dreamers as well, but the researchers and scientists, is that it's interesting to look at it. It's not that dreaming and waking life are completely separate. It's,
mm.
you can look at it on a continuum of experience, of thought, and it's altered states of consciousness. So for a long time that it was thought that the brain is shut off or is, not working, shut off, asleep when we're sleeping and dreaming. And that's not the case. It's very active. The brain is, as we all know, the brain is as active or even more active at certain times of the sleep cycle, like REM sleep. So when you look at dreaming, you can look at it as sort of an altered state of consciousness. It's a disconnected consciousness. is what I've been told as well, is that you've created this simulated virtual world, but it's disconnected from external stimuli, unless, which we can get into later,
Mm.
what I'm learning about is dream engineering and different things, how you can bring in external stimuli to shape your dreams. But overall, generally, you've created this simulated world inside your brain, and but it's separated, it's disconnected from the outside world around you. That's kind of one way to look at it.
I've got so many avenues here. There's so many trailheads I'm looking at for this conversation. I got to choose which one. Okay, so you said it's in a sense it's a simulation, and a
Right.
simulation would in this case would suggest it's not dreams are not just visual; they can be auditory. So does dream states do they take into the five senses? Are there more senses that are kind of built into this augmented reality or this disconnected dream state or state of consciousness, as I think you called it?
So yeah, it's multisensory. So you can,
Mm,
your brain activity is allowing you to see in your dreams. They've found that you're actually, when you look at people in REM, when their eyes move, they're actually following something within their dream, which is so
mm,
fascinating. Yeah, it's multisensory. So you experience it. And it was really interesting. One of the things that really piqued my interest was when I was speaking with different scientists, and they said sort of a resounding common thought is, we discount our dreams, we devalue our dreams, we don't see the importance of them, but we look to our waking lives and we look at all of the experiences and the thoughts that we have, and we reflect on our waking lives. We should do the same for our dreams, because if we spend a third of our lives asleep, what's happening during this time? And
mm,
it made me think about how, self-development, either on your own or if you're in therapy and you're looking to try and understand different perspectives, maybe on yourself, and, reframe maybe an experience that happened in your life. One of the things that I find so valuable about when you look at a dream is looking at your perspective and how you're reacting to something or what you're thinking about
mm.
something. It seems it's a bit of a portal into a different side of you that is accessible. You just have to know how to access it.
And that's what I'd like to explore in the second half of our conversation. I, I'm just really curious. So my challenge is, I think that's really good advice, being able to analyze and maybe take apart our dreams to try to understand them more as we do in our conscious daily lives. My challenge is, and maybe this is a common challenge, is once I wake up, the dream automatically fades. It just I might have sort of little bits of maybe the little threads of it, but I generally can't remember the entire dream, or I just remember a fragment or like the immediacy of a dream, like the last moments. I find that the dreams that I do remember are those that where I might have a nightmare or it's emotionally like I'm emotionally invested. Like that's what I tend to remember, but those may be fever dreams or when my body's too warm and it's wrapped up in too many blankets and it's trying to wake me up or whatever it is. But is this a common thing where we tend to forget our dreams upon awakening?
Yes, it is. So
Okay.
a lot of people think, I've heard many times during the research. So if you're out or you're chatting with someone and you say you're writing a book on dreams, the first thing is either they'll tell you a really fascinating dream, or they'll say, "Oh, I don't dream." And
Hmm.
so I've asked different scientists, and it's just that we don't remember our dreams when we wake up. So if you're going to use your dreams in different ways, a really good tool is to have a piece of paper and a pen at your bedside table. So,
Hmm.
and also I find that helps me fall asleep. So, if I have something on my mind, if something's bothering me, if I'm trying to work through even, say, a work problem, or trying to understand a concept, anything, if something's really pressing on my mind, I find that I'm thinking about it as I fall asleep.
Hmm.
And if I am, sometimes that's the sort of a creative area, an area sleep onset for creativity. And so I find it's better for ideas. You can get really great ideas at that point. So I'll wake up and write down what I'm thinking. But also, I find that if you put down something that's on your mind, it almost gives you the freedom to sort of let it go and get on with sleeping and dreaming. So, yes, it's very common to not remember your dreams. And a way to remember them is to report them, journal them. So you
Mm,
take, and then the intentionality, the act of saying, okay, I'm going to use my dreams, or I'm interested in looking at my dreams. It's been shown that that actually helps you remember them. So
mm,
it's that moment when you first wake up, you have to scribble down what you can. I'm exactly the same. So if I'm thinking about something, then if I wake up and think about it, sometimes I'll tell myself, "Oh, I'm going to remember this later. It's okay. I don't have to write it down." But it
mm.
it doesn't happen that way
No,
unless,
I've
as
been
you just
there.
said, right, unless it's emotionally charged. Then if it's
Mm,
got this emotional salience to it,
mm,
then I might remember. Or as you said, a nightmare. So nightmares oftentimes are, as we know, frightening dreams.
mm.
And you usually wake yourself up oftentimes before there's a resolution, before you have that ending, right? So that's very common.
Like a cliffhanger to be continued.
Yes. Yes.
Hopefully not.
And then
But yeah.
right. But then the problem is it is a cliffhanger, but then you have a recurring dream and it can be very, very upsetting, right? So you
Mm,
can have a recurring upsetting dream, and nightmares, they can be debilitating. So there's
mm,
one of the therapeutic tools is it's called image rehearsal therapy. And so during the day, what you do is you rehearse a different way of looking at that dream. And I found it fascinating. I was speaking with Antonio Zadra, and I didn't realize, I thought that it would be you would want to change the ending. I
mm.
always think of, like, if I have a nightmare, it would be the ending that would be upsetting. But it's dependent on the dreamer. So it could be the beginning, it could be a detail in the dream. It's the dream can be changed in so many different ways to have a different reaction to the dream. I found that fascinating.
Mm. So in a sense, that's like reframing in cognitive behavioral psychology, where we may not be able to influence the situation, but we can influence our perception of a situation by reframing or giving it a different meaning. But this is in case for the dreamscape or the dreams during the day, we can actually remember our nightmare to the degree we can and try to find another perspective.
Yes.
Huh,
And
fascinating.
it's and nightmares are related to our mental health, which is an area that I'm very interested in looking at how our dreams reflect our mental health and our well-being.
Hmm.
And a lot of people who have terrible nightmares, then also it can be an indicator of a mental health issue. So that's really important to look at. Um, and one thing I found really interesting was this idea that dreams can be used as a marker for mental health. So not only do they show if you have, say, ill-being, it's ill-being and well-being. So let's say that your you have ill-being during the day, you are more likely to have negative dreams. But what they've found recently is that if you have well-being, it actually also relates to your dreams. So it can show, say, for example, peace of mind, different. That's a totally new area in well-being, and it's
Peace
Anti
of mind.
Ravanzo and
Hmm.
yes, and Anti Ravanzo and Pillar and Sika and colleagues were looking at specifically how peace of mind influences our dreams. So if we're feeling, it's that sense of harmony and contentment, and how does that reflect our dreams? And it's found that if you have peace of mind, you are more likely to have positive dreams. And if you have, so well-being, and then if you have ill-being, then you're more likely to have negative dreams, which it's very interesting, because
Hmm.
then that says, could we one day look at how we can shape our dreams to have that peace of mind within our dreams, say a
Yeah.
calm state, peaceful state, in order to then shape our waking well-being. So instead of just looking at one, is it bi-directional? So instead of going, is it just from waking to dreams, could we go the other way? Which
So
I find
whether
really
looking at
interesting.
well-being or ill-being, that's reflected in
Yep,
nightmares. And the our dreams are, as you said, can be a marker of mental health. And so coming back to your paper pen tool, keeping in the side of the bed. So if I wanted, let's say I'm having a lot of great dreams or I'm having a lot of terrible dreams, by doing the paper pen at the side of my bed and on the waking of consciousness, I immediately do it. So the more that I practice this tool that you've recommended, does does it become easier to capture my dreams? Is it does. So it's almost a
that's
habitual pattern that I create within my brain.
That's what I've been told. So
Mm,
exactly. So you get used to actually the idea of, or the act, I should say, of reflecting and reporting on your dreams. And it's very similar to the idea of, writing down different things in waking life in order to reflect. Then you can do that practice of recording and of reflecting. So one idea which has been around for many decades is it's well established now that what happens in our waking life is often, predominantly, it's reflected in our dreams.
mm,
So it's called the continuity hypothesis. And it's not just our experiences they've found, but it's our thoughts, our emotions, our preoccupations and concerns, which I'm really interested in, and how we take those and we
mm,
carry them with us into the dream world. And so that's what we're exploring. So I find it interesting if you look at what you're dreaming about. Is there something that you keep coming back to? And one idea that was brought up is, we don't, in our waking lives, we don't look at things in an isolated way. We don't say, oh, we thought of this one thing or we had this one experience. We often look at it um, together, like as a whole. So if we look at our dreams in a similar way and we look for different patterns or different themes, maybe we'll find something that's preoccupying us and weighing on our mind.
mm,
And I find it interesting what is on our mind? What are we dreaming about? And also, how are we exploring that? Because it's not usually the same way. As an example, a very common dream, common stress dream I found are exam dreams. So many people dream of exams, even years after being in school. So you'll dream about um, the whole idea, the exam stress. But what's really unique and personal, and this kind of gets into the whole idea that it's this common experience, but it's also a very personal experience, is that it's the details. So I might forget where the room is that I'm supposed to be writing the exam. Whereas if you dreamt it, maybe you get there and the exam pages are blank. So it's all about how we dream it is very personal. And I find it really interesting how you can explore one concept, one concern, one preoccupation in so many different ways. And and then you just bring it and then you can think about it in your daily life and incorporate it for self-development or even
yeah.
just reflection, creativity. There's so many ways you can use it.
In the audio version of this podcast, people can't see me smiling because when you said the exam dreams, even now, it's not so often. But when I was doing my clinical psychology degree, my graduate degree, part of it was a statistical course, and I was never a big fan of stats, but it was something I had to learn when I was writing my thesis and such. And there was these exams that we had to take, and stats wasn't one I really scored high on. And I still, to this day, have a stress that I haven't studied enough or I've been skipping classes. I never skip classes, but I have this dream. That's like, I get up in the morning, and those are one of the things that I remember, one of those dreams. I know it's not a sexy dream, a statistical exam in
But it just
university.
gets you and
Yeah,
it just
yeah.
stays with you. And you keep thinking, I had to live through this once. Why am I doing this again? That's what I always think. And I'm always
Yeah.
down long corridors and I keep forgetting where I'm going. And then I think, but then I say to myself, my dream self, but I know where I'm going because this is the same classroom that I always went to, but it never seems to get me there.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fascinating that a lot this is a comment I never knew. I never really shared it. It's not that exciting, right? And I usually
Yeah.
forget about it until I have the dream. But I didn't that I find at least I find that fascinating when you talk about,
Mhm.
yeah, common is exam dreams. What? Really? Yeah, so
It's
that's really
really
cool.
and what is also really interesting if anyone's interested in doing an analysis of their dreams and to compare how common say emotions are versus
Mm,
other people's dreams. I found there's this really fascinating website, dreamresearch.net, and it's basic by William Domhoff, and it's an invaluable resource. It's amazing. And so it goes through, it's called the Hall Vandecastle Dream Content Analysis and Coding System. And it's really interesting because there's these norms that you can compare your own dreams to. So you can look at these norms that were put together and you can say, do I have more aggressive dreams than say compared to these norms? Do I dream about certain things more than
mm,
other people? And it's really a neat way to look at your dreams in comparison to what are common emotions,
mm,
common thoughts, those kind of things.
mm.
Because also they've found that it's it's quite remarkable. Approximately 80% of our dreams, or a majority, if you'd like to say, of our dreams are negative. So
Sorry,
that's really
80% you said?
that's what I've read, that 80% in
Oh.
different places I've read that approximately 80% of our dreams, they have a negative tone of some sort. And so I find that really interesting. There's different theories why. We can talk about it if
What
you'd
did
like.
you find that really resonated for you when in regards to
It makes
why 80% or close to 80% has a negative tone?
it makes me think about how two things. It makes me think about how we carry our preoccupations and concerns with us into our dreams.
Mm,
So it's it's like a testing ground. We're going through all of these different preoccupations and we're thinking about them in different ways. Our mind is free. It's more in certain times of the night where we can associate things more freely, think about things in a different way. So it reminds me of how there's that continuity is the first thing. And if there's things that are weighing on us, then we'll play those out in our dreams. And these can be all different types of problems. So the exam dream, or maybe you're just trying to figure out how to solve a problem at work, or maybe you're
mm,
preparing for a presentation, or there's all different things that we could be preoccupied by. Maybe you're thinking of an upcoming job interview or
mm,
anything that comes to your mind. And then the other thing is one
mm,
of the possible functions of dreams, and it was many years ago now, several years ago now, was by Antti Ravanzo, and it's called the threat simulation theory. And so he came up with this idea that we try out all these different threats in our dreams. It prepares us. So trying out all these scenarios in our dreams prepares us for whatever dangers we may encounter in our waking life. So he was telling me about how one of his nightmares was a recurring nightmare. He in the summers he spent his summers at a summer house about an hour outside of Turku in Finland, and they would have these thunderstorms,
mm,
and he would watch them come rolling across the water. And then and he would see that, or sometimes he'd be woken up in the night and his parents would get him, they would all go to the car for safety until the storm was over. And so he had a recurring dream about thunderstorms, but it would be played out in different ways. So it would sometimes just be a storm. Other times he said he paired it with actually a dream that was in Terminator 2 about a nuclear explosion. So then sometimes the
mm.
thunderstorm would morph into this nuclear explosion, and he didn't know what he was running from. So that's one idea, is that we're using our dreams to simulate in this simulated virtual world, and he talks a lot about that. We're using it to simulate different potential dangers in order to, and
Mm,
it's a good thing. It's helping us prepare. So it's not that it's always a bad thing. It's
mm.
that we have to try and prepare.
I almost wondered if it's connected to this negativity bias that all of our brains have. And just to inform any listeners who don't know it, I know you understand what it is, Karen, but it's the idea that our brains tend to constantly search the environment for potential threats or dangers to life and limb. And so that's why we tend to look for problems. That's why we tend to see the negative side of things. And that's obviously the negativity bias. Do you think that that's a little bit of a logical connection
I think
between
so.
this threat simulation theory?
So that, and he looks back to, the hunter-gatherer times when it was that fight or flight
Mm,
response, and you're preparing yourself, you have to run, you have to hide, do you run? Do you run? Do you hide? What do you do? Let's try out all these different
mm,
things to increase our chances of survival. And while, the threats today are obviously much different, one thing that I found so interesting, I was talking to him and I was asking about COVID, and it was so
yeah.
remarkable how we had how overnight this new threat they found became incorporated into our dreams. And so suddenly, most of us pre COVID-19 pandemic, most of us were probably not dreaming about masks and the danger of, say, you hear someone coughing in a crowded space and you don't have a mask, the danger of potentially contracting the virus. And then suddenly, it was almost overnight, we carried this new threat into our dreams, and it was reflected in our dreams so quickly. And it really showed how our daytime stress, is reflected in our dreams. And I found that so interesting.
That,
I don't know
that's
about you,
No, no,
if
I
you were,
find that
yeah,
fascinating because one of the things right after COVID, right? I
yeah,
talk a lot about the brain and leadership and, relationships and such and communication. And one of the things that corporations kept approaching me, even a magazine asked me to write something on something called proximity bias. And proximity, for those who use English as a second language, is distance. And because of people had a lot of people, not everyone, but a majority of people had a social anxiety being around crowds, even after COVID had pretty much passed as the dangerous COVID. Today we have COVID, it's just like the flu kind of thing. But people had social anxiety. People had proximity bias, right? If how close do I get to someone, right? Or when it came to meetings or Teams or on Zoom. So I can see that I myself, someone who works with this every day, I was susceptible to this too. What you speak of really resonates with me because I remember back to those dreams and back to the Finnish research you were talking about, where he was dreaming of nuclear bombs or the mushroom cloud. I haven't thought about it years until you kind of triggered my thinking. I remember I used to love this band called Alphaville, the German band, and they had a song
I
called
know it.
Forever Young, right?
Yeah,
And I remember in the 80s, you used to see Gorbachev and Reagan, they were talking about nuclear war and disarmament and that song. And I remember it wasn't a constant dream, but I had to dream quite often about nuclear war, about mushroom clouds over the city of Toronto and such. And what would I do? I don't remember the details, but I remember remnants of the feelings of those dreams.
yes. Yeah, you wake up with that sort of, exactly. And sometimes you'll wake up and not remember the details of a dream, but
Mm,
I often wake up and left with a feeling. And then I
mm,
lie there and try and rewind in my mind. What was I thinking about? Why am I left with this feeling? And there's nothing like when you wake up from a great dream and you just feel kind of great. And I
That's
feel that it is carried with you, that
mm,
sense of, it's that feeling of sometimes wonder or just contentment.
mm,
And it can carry with you through the day as well. The opposite is true. If you've had a very upsetting dream,
mm.
If you suffer from nightmares, often people don't want to go to bed because they're worried that they're going to dream of the same recurring event, which is so difficult. So there's
Mm.
that such a connection between the waking and dreaming world.
I find that interesting what you're saying because I see a lot of people's sort of not the most constructive mindsets are based on those two things. We get so preoccupied in our concerns, and they can follow us into our dream state on this sort of sliding scale of consciousness or unconsciousness. And a lot of the times people, this was back in the day when I was working in the clinical setting, but now in the corporate setting, people sometimes say to me, Jason, I get up at 3, 4 in the morning. My mind's just racing with all the things that I might forget or I have to do. And one of the techniques I was taught early in the graduate school, both in clinical and corporate, was that, through the day, check in with yourself. What are your concerns? What are the things that you need to remember or need to plan or structure, right? And by doing this through the
Hmm.
day, what happens is that our brains are able to settle down because they think that, okay, Jason has written this down, it's calendared in, he's scheduled it, he's talked to the person, he's made a to-do list. And so by the
Right.
time you come to sleep, most of us, that's when we start thinking about it, or when we're just so exhausted, we sleep, and then all of a sudden our brain wakes us up and think, you're gonna forget this, you're gonna forget this. But I've found time and time again over the years of experience working with different people that if they kind of just catalog and do a little sort of an inventory check once or twice during the day, it doesn't really build up. And over time, I'm not saying this is the light switch, it's more of a dimmer switch. By the end of the by end of doing this a few times, they find that they're not waking up at 3, 4, 5 in the morning, and can't get back to
Hmm.
sleep. And again, for me,
It's
I'm making
really
the
interesting.
connection. Yeah, I'm also making the
Uh,
connection with what you're saying with the pen and paper at your bedside table.
and so I was also, it's very interesting. I read something about how you could because rumination
Mm,
really impacts your sleep quality, and potentially the idea is that it also could, whatever you're ruminating over, you could bring it with you into your dreams and you could dream about that. It impacts your sleep quality. It's been found that you'll wake up more if you're concerned or worried. So it really is yet another, I find another sign that we really need to address what might be on our mind. And I was reading somewhere, one tip was to, as you said, give it yourself a certain time to think about these things so that, because if you push it away during your waking day, during the waking time, you can always distract yourself with so many things. But then I find that when you lie down at night, then different thoughts will come back. But if we have certain times in the day that maybe we could look at these things, what are we thinking about? What is pressing on our mind? Then maybe we're lighter. Our mind is lighter when we lie down. I
mm.
find that so interesting.
I guess
And
it's
yeah,
almost along the same mechanism as processing emotions. We can push emotions away. They'll go away, but
right.
they will come back so much more intensely. But if we process them, then the message is being received from our physiology to our psychology, and they slowly peter out. They quiet down.
And so what they found, this was many years ago, on thought suppression, was that if you try and suppress a thought,
Mm,
it will rebound during the day. They also found that it rebounds at night. So if we're trying to, the actual act of suppressing the thought, rather than, this was the thing that I found so fascinating, not exactly, it might not be the emotional attachment to the thought. So it's the act of trying to suppress, not necessarily what the thought is about, that
mm,
makes it rebound. So um, it was Daniel Wagner and Megan Kozak Williams and colleagues. They did this study, this white bear experiment. And so they had people sit and they had some people think about a white bear and some people could think about whatever they wanted to think about. And then there were other people who thought about the white bear and they went, so the people who, there were two groups who thought about a white bear. The people who were told not to think about the white bear later, it rebounded. The idea of the white bear rebounded, and it just kept popping into their mind. But if you're allowed to think about something, it's not going to rebound into your mind in the same way. So I find that interesting, and they chose a white bear because it's neutral and it relates to Dostoevsky. He talked about a white bear, but it's
Huh.
really interesting. So if you sit and you say, okay, I'm going to think about the white bear for 2 minutes, and then after that you say, I'm not going to think about the white bear, then you had to tick on a piece of paper how many times you thought about the white bear. And it was remarkable how many times it kept popping into your mind. So
My,
it really
mm,
says that we have to deal with what's on our mind, I think. Same
my
as in waking life.
yeah, my evil
Yeah.
producing mind right now is thinking about playing golf, where you could actually tell your buddy, "Hey, don't think about that sand trap or the water trap," right? They
Right,
try to say,
exactly. Right,
"Don't do
because you
that,
always
folks.
see
It's
it.
just
Yeah. You're sitting there going, I see, or you're standing there thinking, I see that water. I can't think about it.
yeah, yeah, yeah."
Maybe
Sorry
I
about
should
that.
aim for the water. Maybe I should aim
Yeah,
for the water and then I
yeah,
won't get there.
exactly,
Right. Yeah.
exactly. I was wondering, before we go into the tools of sort of dream utilization, one fascinating area I'd like to talk to you about is, I guess, lucid dreaming. Perhaps you could maybe define what lucid dreaming is, and yeah, from what you're from your research.
So lucid dreaming is the conscious, it's the awareness that you're dreaming. So let's say you're pick any dream, you're maybe walking through a forest and then you look at something and say there's oftentimes something bizarre happens or something that doesn't seem to make sense and it's atypical. And then you say, wait, that shouldn't be happening. And then you are aware, you say to yourself, I'm dreaming. So it's this lucid dreaming is an awareness that
Mm,
you're dreaming while you're in the dream state. So it's really fascinating because once you have awareness, there's there's a all different ranges of lucidity. So you can have that pure awareness of being in the dream state. But often for me, I will say to myself, "Oh, this I think this is a dream." But then I tell myself, "But I'm really interested in what's going on right now, so I'm just going to let myself be carried away with the dream." So
mm,
it's a state that comes and goes. Just because you get lucidity doesn't, it's very difficult to maintain. But if you are able to maintain this awareness, this consciousness during the dream state, then you're able to work on controlling your dream. So you could change your dreamscape, the dream world, how it looks. You could change what you're doing, who's in your dream, and then, of course, this could be for fun. It could be for entertainment. You could try and fly. I've talked to different people, and a lot of people say when they first realized that they were dreaming, they decided to go outside and fly because it's so exciting that feeling that you'd be able to fly.
mm,
But there's many uses. You could use it for creativity. You could use it to solve a problem. There could be therapeutic uses. The thing that I'm really interested in is how this could potentially be used to, let's say, cultivate a calm dream state. You can do certain things if you practice during the day, how you cultivate a calm mind. Maybe if you are able to control and manipulate, shape your dreams from within your dreams, you're able to
mm.
create this calm state. And then, or different therapeutic uses, you could use it to, say, control a recurring nightmare or even just a bad dream. There's so many ways that you could use it. Um, a recent study, this was so fascinating, and it just catapults the dream research and specifically lucid dream research is Ken Paller at Northwestern University and Karen Conkley, who was the lead author on this study. They did for the first time ever, they achieved two-way communication from the waking world to the dreaming world. So there was a subject, Christopher Mazurek, was in the lab and they practiced during the day um, cues to know that he was lucid. So
Hmm.
You would use cues to know, like, let's say you heard a sound, sounds external stimuli. So if you hear it in your dream, you know that you are dreaming. You could use sound, you could use, some people use smell, light, touch, different external
Hmm.
stimuli. So when he was in his dream, they made this eye signal to indicate that he was lucid. So he became, when he first joined this lab, he had not had a lucid dream. So then he got very good at it. And he was one of the people who I chatted with. And he said it's the
Hmm.
intentionality. And he started a dream journal and writing about his dreams and really reflecting on them. Then he started to lucid dream. And Karen was waiting for the eye signals to signal that he was in he was lucid in his dream, because this happens when you're in REM, and so your body is paralyzed but your eyes go back and forth in REM, the rapid eye movement of REM. So he did the predetermined practiced eye movements to indicate. And then the fascinating thing was that she through it was a recorded voice, it was her voice, and it was a calm recording of her voice. She asked him math problems. So there's only one right answer with a math problem. He had practiced doing this. So he knew that this would happen, but he didn't know what math problems he would get. So he answered correctly. He answered it correctly twice. So then it
Hmm.
showed that not only can many, many years ago, the groundbreaking experiments with Stephen LaBerge and Keith Hearn, they showed that you can signal that you are lucid from a dream. So that has been known for a very long time. But the fascinating part and what's new now is that you can communicate back and forth. And so if you look at all the potential uses for this, even just in terms of dream research, you can study dreams from within. You can see is how does time work in dreams?
Hmm.
How long does a scenario play out versus real time? There's so many different aspects that you can study. And in terms of psychology, all the different questions that we could ask in our waking life, maybe there's questions that we can ask in our dreaming life. And so there were several different groups at the same time. So it was American researchers, a group in the States, a group in France, in Germany, and in the Netherlands. So they were all separately working on these two-way communication lucid dreaming studies. And then they all came together when they found out that they were working at the same time, then they came together and published together. So it really shows that this was across different populations using different stimuli
Hmm.
and achieving this two-way communication.
So this conduit that they've between the waking and non-waking state, as you said, you can manipulate time, you can manipulate what have you to ask certain questions. And I think you were also sort of referring to it to some extent to that this could actually be a technique, a sort of a therapy technique to help people deal with ill-being or well-being, in the sense that if you are feeling well-being, how can you continue it? Or if you're having these nightmares, which could be an indicator of mental health or our preoccupations, our worries or concerns, or our phobias even, that this conduit that they've discovered could be a new type of therapy technique, or has it already launched into some
This is
early
where
steps into.
I think that this is where they're looking. Potentially, how
Hmm.
could this potentially be used as a therapeutic tool? From my knowledge, it's not being used, right? This is all new, the two-way communication.
Okay.
So the
Hmm.
possibilities now they're looking into well-being is an area I'm really interested in. And I found out
Hmm.
that this is an area that is, there's a lot of research going on now
Hmm.
in how dreams can be used to impact our well-being and better our waking lives. So there's so many different possibilities with this. It's fascinating. And there's another
It is.
area.
Hmm.
It's just so fascinating. So this gets into the idea of dream engineering. So it sounds to me that this is, the next frontier in dream research. It's how we can shape, guide, control our dreams for different purposes. So there was, as an example, I spoke with Adam Horowitz, and he, along with his colleagues at MIT and Harvard, he developed this device. It's called Dormio, and basically it's using technology to help you dream about a particular thing. So do you want me to tell you how it works?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
I'm fascinated. Please.
it's so
The mic
interesting.
is all
So
yours.
okay, so basically the way it works is he used an example of a tree, but you can decide whatever you want to think about. And this is looking at the area of the time of sleep, it's sleep onset. So it's that beginning of the sleep cycle and this has been found to be a time of potentially of great creativity. So you can take the idea of a tree, and as you're falling asleep, you're trying to think about a tree, you're falling asleep. And then when you reach sleep onset, when this device, it's a glove, but you can also do this, anyone can do this at home without the device, about around 10 to 15 minutes after you get into bed, you usually start falling asleep.
Mhm.
And then you're woken up with, say, either a sound if you're not using this device, or it could be um, touch. So it could be you could feel something on your hand. And then what they found is that when you're thinking about a tree, you're thinking about it in all different creative ways. It's not that you're just thinking about it in this one concrete way. So you have this time in which it's this creative free association time in your mind where you can explore and delve into things in a totally unique way. And it reminds me of how it's related to, say, it's your brainstorming in a different way, but you're going into the sleep process, into the sleep cycle. So it's like when you're brainstorming or mind wandering during the day, and you let
Mm.
your mind wander, you start thinking about things in different ways. But this is it's a different type of brainstorming, and I find that so interesting.
So let me just make sure I rewind and understand here. So if I
Yeah.
wanted to be creative about a tree, so just before I go as I go to sleep, I'm thinking about the tree and I try to keep my mind on the tree. And before I do that, maybe I set my smartphone to go off in 20 minutes or something, just
15, about 10 or 15, let's say
10 or
15.
15 minutes.
Yeah.
And so as I move from that consciousness, slide through that spectrum into unconsciousness or the dream states, this is the most creative point. And at that 10 or 15-minute point, I get up, use your other first tool that you said, paper and pen at my side, and just start writing. Just write
Yes.
anything, as silly or as profound as that thought or pictures come, get them down, emotions, thoughts, metaphors, pictures, whatever. Is that what I understand?
Exactly. So
Fascinating.
I'm going to try and do this. I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to do it.
Okay.
So it's going to be great. So I want to do it on what is a dream. So I want to just keep the word, instead of tree, I want to have the word dream in my mind. And obviously it's on my mind quite a bit right now, but
Yeah.
so I'm thinking about it all the time. So I want to see how I can look at it. It made me think of it because when I'm talking to different scientists and
Mm,
researchers, I love the idea of looking at dreams as this, continuum of experience and continuum of thought, and how during the day our thoughts were so there's all these things coming at us,
mm,
and we're not able to have this freedom of thought. So there's this continuum of experience. So I want to look at, what is a dream? Is it this multi-sensory experience? Is it
mm.
virtual simulated reality that's disconnected from all the different ways we can look at dreaming? So I'm going to try and do it. And then I'm going to do a timer. I have it all set up, and I'll do a timer. And Adam was helping me with it. It's great.
Well, that's incredible. I was just thinking about your husband, who's a painter. You have this brilliant orange painting behind you. That's
Oh,
something
thank
he
you.
could definitely do, to help his he seems like a very super creative guy already, but I guess he could become a super creative guy. But
So
nonetheless, oh yeah.
that's what happened. So that's a lot of writers, artists, they can
Hmm.
also do that with lucid dreaming. So what they do is they dream about I was speaking with someone about this, and they dream about Benjamin Baird was telling me how you dream about walking in, opening a door to, let's say, an art gallery,
Mm,
and you're looking at all these paintings, but all the paintings you're looking at are a creation of your mind. So you're creating these paintings in your dream. And then if they wake up, certain artists or composers, he was speaking with a composer, they wake up and then write down the ideas or sketch it out.
mm.
And this came, it's so fascinating how it's part of you. It comes from you, but it's a different aspect of you. It's a different side of you that you can tap into. It's really
That's
neat.
fascinating because, again, my brain's making some connective tissues here between with what you're saying and some of the things that I do or in my practice as a sparring partner with my clients. And one of the things sometimes where we maybe at a party, this happens, someone's telling our names, we forget their names, and we're thinking, oh, I can't remember. But then when we're driving home, it pops up. And so sometimes what I say to clients is if they're working to try to crack a code or there's some sort of conundrum they're trying to work through, is that, load the mind with all the data, all the information you have, the facts and such. Just load
Mhm.
it up so you have some information base and then go for a run, go for a walk, take your dog for a walk and just let it go. And with all that information that you fed your brain, it starts crunching because now it has the freedom because you're focusing on the blue sky or the birds or a podcast or something. And so your brain goes, okay, the conscious mind it's busy with something else. Now I have time to crunch it. And sometimes by the end of the walk or the end of the run, the initial threads of a new solution or insight start coming up. Is this kind of connected to what you're saying, but in obviously in the dream state?
I'm nodding because that's what I do too. So if I'm having something that I can't figure out or I'm trying to figure out a way, the other day I was trying to figure out a way to describe this one type of dream research, and
Mm,
I thought, okay, I've got to get out. So I actually usually I run, but I was up north and I went for a kayak. And while I'm part of my mind is focusing on paddling
mm,
and thinking about the trees around me and the water, there's that default, there's this part of my mind that then starts thinking about what's on my mind. And I love that.
mm.
That's what I do too.
Okay.
It
Yeah. Yeah.
reminds me, yeah, it's wonderful. Um, it reminds me of, so there's, in terms of functions, we talked a little bit about how dreaming sleep
Mm,
across the sleep cycle can impact memory as well as learning. And it reminds me of two things. The first one, well, actually, I'll talk to, so basically, Robert Stickgold and Antonia Zadra have this theory, and it's called next up. And I find it so interesting how during REM sleep, we make these weak associations. So it's a different way of learning. So instead of going through one task and trying to master a task in a certain way,
mhm,
we might be associating a memory with all of these different things in our semantic memory. So I was speaking with Antonio Zadra, and he said it's like opening up these drawers in our autobiographical memory and trying to figure out where things fit together. And it makes me think about how you can take something that happened and then you might pair it with something that happened so long ago in your childhood. And I find it so interesting how we make these associations,
mm.
and your mind is so creative. It's free to make these creative associations. It's really interesting that way.
I'd like just to rewind back to a conversation about lucid dreaming. We talked about how it
Hmm.
can be advantageous and, some of the research, fascinating research. My question is, how does someone get into the practice of lucid dreaming? Like, how do you start it? How can you be conscious? I think you've talked about a few things, but I just like to kind of open that up a little, maybe
Hmm.
because I think that's also talking about sort of the tools for dream utilization, I think.
Yes. So, and um, there's different practices. There's different tools that you can use, and I'm going to go into it as well. And I'm going to, in my book, I'm going to have a toolkit at the back to try and
Mm,
give tips that I've learned from different researchers and scientists. And it goes very far back, and Stephen LeBerge wrote a lot about it. There's different practices that you can do to help the potential of lucid dreaming. So reality checks. So they're not sure why this happens, but oftentimes in dreams, you don't have the right number of fingers. So something to do, I'm not sure why. I don't think they know why, but
Mm.
so during the day, you're supposed to do reality checks and say, be aware of your surroundings. I'm here right now. I'm sitting at my desk. I'm looking at my hands. I have 10 fingers. This is what I see. I see a glass. Doing these
Mm.
reality checks. And then when you're in your dream, you could look at your hands and see how many fingers you have. Or sometimes there's a problem with a light switch. If you try in your dreams to turn on and off a light, sometimes it doesn't work, I've read. There's different things that, or reading. I think I read something about if you try and read a piece of paper, what's on it, that's difficult. So you can do those kind of things, little reality checks. Also, it's the intentionality of saying, I'm going to really try and have this lucid dream. And you can do
Mm.
it from uh, falling asleep, or you can wake yourself up in the middle of the night. Some people wake themselves up and then go back to sleep with the intention of having a lucid dream. So you could just at night fall asleep thinking, oh, I'm going to try and have a lucid dream. I'm really going to think about if I'm dreaming. And then, or you could set an alarm, wake yourself up
Mm.
and say, okay, now I'm going to try and fall back asleep with the intention. It's that intentionality again.
Yes.
And also, when I spoke with different people, it's the regular act of writing down your dreams and recording your dreams and thinking about your dreams and the reflecting on your waking world and your dream world. So what am I looking at? This is all, it's a simulated reality going through my brain right now. What do I see? How is it similar when I'm in my dream world?
Mm.
And then trying to tell yourself when you are lucid to be aware. I always just get too excited and either I wake up or I let myself just be carried on by my dream. I got to work on that.
Yeah, yeah, no, okay, so it's intentionality. I guess also with the tree example, when it came to creativity, it may be
Right.
just that, the intention of dreaming about how to see a tree in another creative process, that intentionality, without waking yourself up at 10 or 15 minutes, but it could be a
Right.
way into that lucid dreaming aspect.
And that gets into with the tree example that we talked about, that type of dream engineering, that gets into the idea of dream incubation. So you incubate on a problem or something that you want to think about, and then you can take that and really explore it, whether it be a tree or what is a dream or anything, and just really explore that.
Mm.
It's really interesting.
And so I
And
guess, I'm sorry.
no, no, no.
Oh, no, I was also thinking about back to what you're saying, how dreams, or at least recurring dreams, or recurring themes of dreams, whether they be good dreams or bad dreams, depending on how we define it, that could be an indicator of mental health or some mental challenge, such as rumination, if it's more negative thinking that we're thinking about and how it comes up. So, would you say some of these lucid dreamings, these techniques you talked about, reality checks, intentionality, and incubating, are ways of us trying to deal with these dreams to try to understand the elements, the DNA, to try to help ourselves move from ill-being to well-being?
I look at it, I'm really interested in how we can use our dreams to better our waking lives however we want to. So
Mm.
exactly, to better our well-being, we could use lucid dreaming, we could use dream incubation, we could use dream analysis. You could use the different tools to see what patterns are happening in your dreams, and then it's up to us to choose if that has meaning or not. So
Mm.
what meaning do we take from it? Maybe there isn't any. Maybe we feel that there isn't, or maybe we feel that there is. And definitely, I find that it's ways that we can use our dreams to better our waking lives. And that's what really fascinates me about dreams. How it's
Mm.
this, we spend a third of our lives sleeping and a great portion of that dreaming, and how we can really learn a lot about ourselves and try and solve problems and come up with creative solutions and
Mm.
all these different things that we try to do during the day, we can also look at doing it at night when we're
And
sleeping and
and so
dreaming.
recurring dreams, if it's the same sort of similar, maybe not identical course, but similar dreams around the same theme, it may not be something negative, but is it a way sometimes the unconscious mind is trying to communicate to the conscious mind to recall something? Because a lot of the times, as you say, it's a very strange territory ecosystem we're working because it merges and it morphs. But I sometimes wonder if person's having a recurring dream, let's say it's not nothing super negative or super good, but it's just a recurring dream. Would
Right.
that indicate there may be something that the deeper mind state is trying to connect or to communicate to the conscious mind?
It makes me think personally, why do I keep dreaming about something? What could be the
Mm,
reason why? And so I would be looking, if that happens to me, I'm looking for common themes. Like it might not be the same
mm,
dream, but maybe there's something that I'm trying to explore, work out, go through, and it could be positive or negative. Why do I keep coming back to this one thing? What
mm,
is this indicating? And I think it goes back to it's our choice how we use our dreams because a
mm.
lot of people just don't pay attention to sleep or to dreams. And there's a lot of awareness about the importance of sleep. There's there should be the same awareness for the importance of dream sleep and how important it is for our physical health, our mental health, our well-being, and personal development and how we can see ourselves differently. I That's what I'm so interested in.
Another question that just sprang to mind is there a connection between sort of hypnosis and I'm not talking sort of trick stage hypnosis, I'm talking deep therapy hypnosis and the dream state? Is this somewhere along this continuum between conscious and unconscious or between awareness and dream state?
So it's another altered state. From what I
Mm,
understand, it's another altered state of consciousness, and how different, even how when we're daydreaming,
mm,
mind wandering, that's an altered state of consciousness.
okay.
And what was really interesting, I'm just writing about this now. There's a group and they call themselves the Dream Team. They're at Stanford. And it's through Boris Heifetz's lab, and it's Harrison Chow and Pilar and Sika and colleagues. And they're looking at anesthesia-induced dreams. So what they found is that when you come out of anesthesia and it's a gentle, slow awakening, before it's just under the surface of consciousness,
Mm,
you get into this very peaceful, calm state of mind. And it's during this time that people are having the most the word that is being used is that when I speak with different dreamers is transformational. They're having these transformational dreams. And it reminded me what you were saying because it's similar to psychedelic medicine. So how it's the role of a very powerful experience to change your thoughts, behaviors in your waking life. Because it seems quite remarkable that, say, one dream could have such an impact on a person. But when you speak with these people, it's so impactful. And so what's happening is they're revisiting something in this peaceful, calm state of mind. So you're you don't have that arousal, that emotion, that emotional arousal, but you're revisiting what could potentially be a very traumatic experience. But it's as if in this peaceful state of mind, you're able to process it differently. And what's happening is then when you come back into the waking world, you it's your people are the way that they think about the past traumatic event has changed, their mindset has
mm.
changed. Different people who were suffering from PTSD, their symptoms are gone, their nightmares are gone. It's unbelievable. It's
That's
really
fascinating.
interesting.
I was going to ask you a question, but you've already answered my question because I was listening to a documentary. I can't remember if it was a podcast or something, where American soldiers coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, where they had severe, I mean, crippling PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and they were doing again through therapy, psychedelic therapy, where it's just that, where they talked about where they reached such a sort of a different state of consciousness, a different state of mind that it's
Hmm.
this peace, it's this tranquility, and then you can bring up the trauma, but from that perspective, wherever the mind is, they see it from it's a whole new level of reframing, if I may just use my vernacular, and then they come out of it, and those preoccupations, those concerns, those worry, the trauma, it is literally or metaphorically melted away, I should say,
Yes.
and
Yes.
they're able to deal with. I, I just found that fascinating. I wasn't thinking we are going to go down that avenue, but that was brilliant how you brought that
So
up because
interesting.
it just it really because that I used to work with trauma and that's why I find it so super fascinating, right? This is a couple of decades ago, but I
Right.
just found that fascinating part of the research that you've explored.
It's so interesting. And so this is very new and this is happening right now. So what they're
Mm,
now doing is they're looking at it in a non-surgical setting. So they're now looking at it in the lab to see if what's
mm,
happening, first of all, and to understand it better. We know it that they know at this point that the dreams are always or almost always positive. So that's different than typically ordinary dreams, which most of our dreams are negative. So, first of all, they're very positive. They're so vivid that people call them hyper real. They're more than real.
mm,
And I spoke with one person and she said it's more like an experience than a dream. You feel that you're really experiencing it. So that's what's really unique about these. And then it's the transformational aspect because you're oftentimes people are exploring things that may be difficult or
mm.
things that they wish they had, and then they achieve them in their dreams. And so they're looking at this in the non-surgical setting and to see how can this be used as a therapeutic tool. And that I'm so excited to see what happens because that's amazing.
That is amazing. I'm very respectful of your time, Karen. I have one last a couple last questions. I was wondering, what did you learn yourself? You've immersed yourself so deeply in the science and the research and the conversations with people in these fields. What have you learned about yourself in the process of putting this book together?
I've learned that we need to value our dreams. We need to look at our dreams in a different light. I personally, I'm now looking at them in relation to how I look at my waking experiences and
Mm,
my waking thoughts and my perceptions and how I can look at my dream experiences and what I'm exploring in my dreams and see what I can get out of that to understand a bit more about what's on my mind, how can I use my dreams, and how it's this continuum. It's not that dreaming and waking are these separate things. There is a
mm.
continuum, and we should look at our dream experiences the way that we look at our waking experiences and how we can learn from them.
Fascinating. It's such a brilliant conversation. I have a dozen more questions. I think there may have to be a part two. But if people want to follow you, if they wanted to reach out and see what you put out there, how can they follow you, Karen? Or where
So
can they
I've
follow
just
you?
Thanks. So I just started on Instagram. It's called Science of You and Me. And what I'm doing, the intention is that I'm going to be sharing what I learn along the way. Every time I have one of these interviews and I meet with someone new, I'm just astounded by all the different things that I learn. And so I'm going to be taking different things that I'm learning and insights along the way and sharing them there. And I would love to hear from people and understand what interests them about their dreams and what they're because it's such a mysterious altered state of consciousness that we don't fully understand. So what is it that some people would like to know more about? I'd love to hear from them.
Brilliant. I'll be sure to include that in the show notes. Karen, thank you very much for your time today and sharing your knowledge, experience, and all your research. I'm really looking forward to this book when it lands. When, we don't know, but that doesn't matter. I'm still looking forward. But in the meantime, we can follow your adventures in Dreamland and the research through Instagram.
Thanks so much. This was a great conversation. Thank you.
Cheers, Karen.